welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. I'm Scott McMahon, and I apologize for my tardiness. It has been a day. Just so many stories, so much going on. I feel like I'm just absolutely drinking through a fire hose, and I like it that way. I wouldn't have it any other way. So, thank you for joining us, um, and yeah, again, I apologize for being about 5 minutes late, but here I am, and I'm happy to be here. So, um, there's there's a lot that I wanna cover and, a lot going on, but really what I wanna focus on is, kinda someone asked, what's my logic uh, in my belief that Kash Patel would be the wrong choice for the FBI director. And so I kind of laid that out, and I'm going to go over that because I think it's important. And this will also be a good primer if you are new to me, or if you're kind of on the fence about, I don't know if Flynn's a good guy or not. I have nothing personally against Flynn. I never have. I don't really have anything personally against anyone. I just, as a journalist, I've been following the evidence where it leads me. That was the commitment that I made to myself and to God when I started this, and I'm just continuing along that. So I'm going to show you kind of some of the evidentiary path that's led me in kind of 13 steps to to where I'm currently standing in the conclusions that I've made, and I encourage you to come to your own conclusions. So, um, before we get there, I just want to cover a few things. Yeah, I think that is important to think about. One thing, I used to listen to Steve Bannon every single day. I, from the very moment that he started his show when it was called War Room Impeachment, I started listening to it every single day. And while I listened to it on 2.5 speed as I was mowing the grass, or driving around for work, or whatever I was doing. That's what I listened to. And one thing that I really liked about him is, and still like about him, is that he talks about signal, not noise. You got to really focus on the signal, not the noise. And I think that's a really important kind of and useful mantra. So signal is what Trump says. Noise is all of the interpretation of what Trump says. So I'm gonna provide you a little bit of noise, based on the actual signal. So let's start with that. First, if you have not subscribed to my Substack, I would very much appreciate if you would. For $5 a month, you get access to my members only content, which I do every Fridays, and at least for another, little bit, maybe another week or two, I don't know. I'll probably be doing a members only show with Jason Goodman for another couple episodes or so. And we'll see how that goes. And I value your feedback. There's some other things that I want to continue. So I don't think that's going to be a long-term thing. I want to add, there's some other guests that I want to have. And I think that I want to kind of transition to doing more of a daily show kind of thing. Um, so I'm working towards that, and we'll see how that goes. But I appreciate your support. And it also, $5 a month gets you access to all my archives. And so some of the things I'm talking about today, are in my archives. And the pinned story here on the top is this summary when you go to biggertruthmedia.com. And that has kind of a written summary that includes some of what I'm going to share. And it also includes my presentation in Oklahoma, which includes a lot of stuff that's even beyond what I'm going to share here. And you also get to see Clay Clark in attendance giving salty tears at the end. No, I don't think that they were actually real tears, just his chin was quivering a little bit. So, um, this is a post on Twitter from Chris LaCivita a couple weeks ago after the election. He says, "Post-elect Twitter is such a target-rich environment," and that is so far my favorite tweet. It continues to be my favorite tweet since the election. And I think that he's talking about the left and the right, and that's my view. I mean, it's possible he's only talking about the left, but I think that there's a lot. And this whole movement from the Democrats over to blue sky, I spent about 5 or 10 minutes there last night just scrolling through it. And yeah, I didn't find it all that interesting. I was hoping that the Democrats would be like, this is our space, and so then they really kinda go crazy, but, yeah, they're a little bit more subdued actually because they're in an echo chamber, so they're not trying to, um, convince each other of anything. They're just posting pictures of bunnies and stuff, I don't know, but we'll see. Yeah, I think they'll probably be back. I'm sure they'll get bored. So, this right here, make it a little bigger. This just happened today or last night, and Trump announced that Pete Hoekstra is who was the Michigan state Republican Party chair. I've talked to him a few times, and I very much like him. I think there's something that I've just observed from a distance in Trump, and I've never met or spoken with him, at least not yet, but I think that he is an exceptionally friendly person, and just in observing him, he tends to be very forgiving and very kind, and he doesn't seem to badmouth anybody. When he's on the campaign trail and talking about his political opponent, that might be a little different, but that's to be expected. That's part of the game. But Pete Hoekstra is very similar to that. Um, so I just he is nominated now to the U.S. ambassador to Canada, and I just think that that's so awesome, especially Canada. I think it's an important country, especially with how far left it is, and also the influence that the Chinese Communist Party has over Canada. And um, so I think Pete Hoekstra is very loyal to Trump. I think he'll do whatever Trump wants him to do, and um, and I think he'll do it well and courageously. And he did that here in Michigan. He demonstrated that being completely under fire. And I've started a thread on X, and I'm going to continue. There's so much more to post of all of the just terrible slander that has been heaped upon Pete Hoekstra, and even about upon Trump by the fake Republican operatives who call themselves the grassroots in the Michigan Republican Party. So one of them, who's been very, very active the last 24 hours, especially since Hoekstra's nomination, is Kristen Megan Kelly. And um, so Kristen Megan Kelly, maybe you're familiar with her. She's actually on the Trump whiteboard in Clay Clark's place, the influence uh, the influence map. Um, and she's involved with Stand Up Michigan, which is an organization that was started by my friend Garrett Soldano, and then it was taken over, and he no longer has anything to do with it, and it's kind of been led into a not constructive direction. Um, this kind of anti-Republican, fake grassroots kind of quasi-Marxist, functionally Marxist direction. But these two posts, and she's just gone bananas all over. But I'm going to read the one on the right first. She says, I'm barely using Facebook at this point because I'm all over X exposing Rogers and Hoekstra. Sneaky Pete was just appointed ambassador for Canada, and while I'm so glad to see the fugly ass liver spotted cabbage patch is what she calls Pete Hoekstra out of the MIGOP. My friends in Canada need to know you have an oath violating anti-constitutional ambassador on the way. So she's dehumanizing him. I mean, it's insane. And this is just, it's disgusting. But this is who she is. But this one right here is really interesting. She says, I know several people who are not willing to even entertain the idea of accepting any nominations until Rogers is ruled out as the head of the FBI. I mean, this is so stupid. She's not talking to people who are in power. If she were, she would say who they are because she'd brag about it. She's just talking about dumb, like people who think that they're the grassroots and that they think that they're a lot more important than they really are. And so they're saying, they're not entertaining the idea of accepting any nominations. Who cares what they think? Who cares? I mean, they're not. She's not talking to people in a position of accepting nominations. If she were, she would say she was talking to senators. Um, she's just talking about armchair quarterbacks, and just it's ridiculous. Um, so I don't think that Mike Rogers is really in contention for the FBI. I would be surprised if he is. Um, It's possible. I don't think he would be a good choice. But then she says, I did not vote for him. So he was just running for Senate against Alyssa Slotkin. Alyssa Slotkin is a communist. She is extremely far left, and she was the Democrat. And so she's admitting here, she says, I did not vote for him, and also educated people not to vote for him for the Senate. So she's admitting right here that Kristen Megan Kelly with Stand Up Michigan, who is very close with Ottawa Impact and that whole just Yahoo group of lunatics that they're crazy, that she's been campaigning for Alyssa Slotkin. And yeah, and this is a big deal. This is a big deal. So Kristen Megan Kelly was campaigning for Alyssa Slotkin. Um, she says, I've been paying attention over 15 years to what congressmen and senators have been doing in violation of their oath. The same goes for Hoekstra. I'm so tired of people saying they're in violation of their oath. Um, the way that they use that is it's so general. It's just this catch-all accusation that they use. It's just like calling people rhinos, and it's something that they use to try to, you know, anger people and join them in saying, this person is violating the Constitution or whatever without actually giving any specific evidence, of course. I mean, there is none. This is her exposing, apparently, is just being mean. Diesel D's, what up? What up? Deb, glad you're here. We the people and do not comply. Thank you for being here. If you have questions as we go, you're welcome to interrupt. And so back on track. So there's a lot more. I'm going to put those in that feed. If you have anything from Michigan Republican Party that is particularly juicy as far as slander of Hoekstra and people revealing themselves as being opposed to President Trump and his choice there, I think that would be, I'd love to share it. You're welcome to DM me and I will include it in that thread. So Trump posted this just happened, I think, in the last couple hours. About just, it says 2 hours, and I just grabbed this right before going live. So this is 2 hours ago. Matt Gaetz stepped down. So he is no longer um in the running for attorney general. And if you were on my show when it was announced that he was that when Trump announced that he had picked Matt Gaetz, my reaction was I was pretty shocked and disappointed. And my disappointment stemmed from knowing that Matt Gaetz, at least in his first, I know in 2016 is when he first ran for U.S. House, and Roger Stone was his campaign manager. And uh, I know that he and Roger Stone at least were close. That I don't, in the movie that was made about Roger Stone, I think it's A Storm Foretold, that Roger Stone sued to make sure that it wouldn't be watched in the United States. So if you want to watch it now, unless you can find a DVD somewhere or a pirated copy somewhere online, which I haven't been able to find. I'd love to watch a pirated copy. I haven't been able to find it. The only way you can watch it is if you use a VPN in a foreign streaming service. Storm Foretold. Thank you, we the people. So, um, yeah, but there's a lot of juicy stuff in there. But one of them is, and I shared it last week, is that um, or Roger Stone talks to Matt Gaetz about, and he's asking Matt Gaetz to get him a pardon from Trump preemptively because Roger Stone knew that he was involved in setting up January 6th. Diesel says any politician or justice who adopts foreign kids is sus. Yeah, and that is one of the many crazy things. When he's 30 years old, unmarried, he adopts a 12-year-old boy from another country. And um yeah, there's I think that part of this is because of the investigation into Matt Gaetz. I said last week, I think that there's a lot more to that, and there's um I have some unpublished research that I can't unfortunately talk about, but I do believe that there is some merit to the allegations, um, not just with teenage girls. So, um, I you know, that's my opinion. But, I do think that there's something to it, and, I mean, this him stepping down certainly kind of bolsters that. Maybe there's not, but, so Trump here says, "I greatly appreciate the recent efforts of Matt Gaetz in seeking approval to be Attorney General. He was doing very well, but at the same time did not want to be a distraction for the administration, for which he has much respect. Matt has a wonderful future. I look forward to watching all of the great things he will do." And this is, just another example of Trump being very, you know, Gates. The whole thing was crazy, and I've heard a lot of um um okay. Oh well, great. This is a link from We the People for I don't know if this is the whole movie, but yeah, it often shows up on Rumble and then it gets taken down. So I won't leave it up there very long. Hopefully um yes, we can that'll stay up at least till after this so I can download it. Um Kara says, "What's wrong with adopting kids?" There's absolutely nothing wrong with adopting kids. Adopting kids is wonderful, but when a single man adopts a child who also has where there are allegations of other sexual impropriety with minors, that is it just raises red flags. And I generally think that it's my belief that the best people to adopt children are married couples. um, and that's largely because the science really shows that that the children do best in a home with a mother and a father. So, yeah, that's my view on that. We the People says, "Whole movie. All right, sweet. Thank you very much for sharing that." Um, and yeah, I do hope it's still there after the show because I'm gonna race right over there and download it. Um, and yeah, so that good stuff there. So let's move on. So that is Matt Gaetz, and I've talked to a few different people within the party just even this morning about the Matt Gaetz situation, and the consensus seems to be that um, when asking, well, why did Trump do this? Some people said even then that Trump had chosen him to expose him, and okay, and that very well may be. I think that because there seems to be just the way that the allegations and the ethics investigation has been described, it appears that there's a lot to it, and it appears to me that Matt Gaetz was going to step down from the House regardless. And so, and I said even at the time that maybe what Matt Gaetz was, because I didn't think that I didn't see any way that he was going to get confirmed. And I've talked about that at some length, but I really thought that what Trump was actually doing was kind of a negotiation move where he was putting forward Gates to draw the attention away from any negative attention away from other people that he was nominating. And then after everybody else got nominated, everybody's all worried about Gates, then he replaces Gates with Paxton. I think most people thought that it was going to be Paxton as Attorney General from the start, and so we'll see if that's what he ends up doing. Um, so we will see. I mean, this is, and that's kind of what I've been saying all along is I don't think we need to get so worked up over who Trump's picking or who he's not picking. But as I will get into, I think it's important to lay out a logical case and an evidentiary case. Why I think that Cash Patel would be a bad idea, because there's not a lot of people saying that. And there's a lot of people saying that they don't like him, but there's not a lot of, okay, this is the logic and reason behind it. So we're going to get to that. This post, though, first, I thought was really interesting. And Trump says, and this was yesterday, Trump says, "This is what the radical left lunatics do to people. They dirty them up, they destroy them, and then they spit them out. They are trying that right now with some great American patriots who are only trying to fix the mess that the Democrats have made of our country. We will win, MAGA. So the question that I have is, who are they trying? Who is they? So they appears to be the radical left lunatics. That's what it appears to be in the context here. He says they are trying that right now with some great American patriots who are only trying to fix the mess. And so I think that they're talking about Gates. I think, initially I thought, well, maybe he's talking about Flynn. I even thought for a moment, oh, what's he, what if he's talking about those of us that are trying to expose Flynn, but maybe, and as I thought about this a little more, it probably actually has nothing at all to do with Flynn. He's really just talking about what the left was trying to do to Matt Gaetz. I don't know. But sometimes Trump talks in kind of cryptic means like that. But um, let's go on to um, hang on just a second. Um, so Diesel says Judge Amy Comey Barrett did too. And Trump has exposed many. He shines the light on them and they expose themselves. And that really may be exactly what this was. He was just, maybe Trump wanted Matt Gaetz out of Congress. That there's another story that I haven't really talked about too much, but it's relating to Mike Johnson. And I'll go ahead and tell the story real quick because I think it's important to understand, and I think it's very real. It's something that's kind of been happening behind the scenes, and this is part of the reason why I was so shocked that he chose Matt Gaetz, because Matt Gaetz was on kind of the opposite side of Trump on that story, and that's Mike Johnson. I mean, there have been really consistent and broad attacks against Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. And just last weekend, when Trump flew out to Madison Square Garden to go to the UFC fight, and I think it was Don Jr., Elon, who else was on the plane? And it's a Don Jr., Elon, Mike Rogers, and maybe Eric Trump. I don't have the picture here, but along with President Trump. Oh no, it was RFK. So RFK Jr. and Elon and Don Jr. and Mike Johnson. And Mike Johnson, because there were 4 seats at the table, right? And they were having McDonald's. And Mike Johnson was kind of like the fifth wheel. But he was there in the picture. He was very deliberately there in the picture. He was there at the fight. He was, pictures with Trump there at the fight. And I said after that he really deserved to be there. And I think that this, so there's some history there, and it goes back to April, especially. In April, there's an organization called the Center for American Renewal that's headed by Russ Vogt, and Russ Vogt is close to Steve Bannon, and he's kind of like um, the ideological coach, or kind of like a priest, but not religious, not not spiritual, not in a spiritual sense, but he's just kind of he sets a lot of the narratives for the Freedom Caucus. And the Freedom Caucus in the House is the farther right elements of the House: Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, um, Paul Gosar, those kind of people. And so there was an event that they held at the beginning of April, and Russ Vogt organized it. Steve Bannon was the keynote speaker. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, all those people were there. And this wasn't that it didn't have a lot of fanfare. I only know about it because I have a friend in the party who was invited to it. And it may have been invitation only. I'm not sure, because I never saw any advertisements or any videos or anything of the event. It was immediately after that event, because I was told about it. I started just watching and seeing what's going to come of this. Immediately, the Monday after that event, or even on the Sunday after that event, is when these coordinated attacks against Mike Johnson really started. There were criticisms long before that. There were criticisms, but not coordinated narrative attacks like there were after this event. It started immediately. And Bannon in particular was super aggressive. He actually said at that time, it was a week, maybe 2 weeks, every single day, he was just full on going after Mike Johnson, saying he needed to be removed. Now, he brought some things up for a vote, funding for Ukraine and stuff like that, stuff that wasn't good. I mean, he brought stuff up that was not good, but he's not responsible for it passing. He brought it up for a vote. The body voted for it. And I think that there's a lot of pressure for him to bring those things up for a vote. But what happened right after that was really interesting. So Bannon actually said, "I don't care if it makes Hakeem Jeffries speaker. We've got to get rid of Mike Johnson." And right at that time on April, I think it was April 13th, President Trump held an event in at Mar-a-Lago, and it was invitation only. And I had a friend that was at that event. There were 3 or 400 people at that event. The very first speaker was Mike Johnson. President Trump introduced him. President Trump was there, and spoke kind of throughout the whole thing. It was kind of like the MC in a way, but he introduced Mike Johnson, and he says, "We need to get behind Mike Johnson. We need to support him, and we need to keep the House majority." And so he understood that there was a very real threat. And I was speaking out about this at the time. I just, I had a smaller account then, and I didn't have the reach the growing reach that I have now. But he was he was Trump was really very much defending Mike Johnson. And we only had at there were 3 defections, 3 true rhinos within the House who had quit, and they just suddenly got up and quit. And these are people who were very much, never Trumpers, Republicans. And so then we only had a majority of 4 seats, and had all it would have taken was 4 more people just quitting, and it would have made Hakeem Jeffries the speaker. And had there been an actual effort, a real effort, Marjorie Taylor Greene started it, and it was so close. We were really close to losing the Republican majority in the House. Jamie Raskin at that same time said, and even right before that, said publicly in a recording that wasn't released until later, he said what would happen if they had the majority, if the Democrats had the majority. He said that, they would have done everything they could to prevent even a victorious Trump from becoming the president. But it went even beyond that, because there was the Colorado Supreme Court case where the Colorado Secretary of State had just unilaterally by fiat declared that she was going to remove President Trump from the ballot. The Supreme Court weighed in and said that you can't do that. And part of their justification, not their total justification, but part of it was that one person can't just decide that something is an insurrection. It takes, because insurrection, they used that word very deliberately, because in our Constitution it says that someone who commits insurrection is not eligible to run for office. And so so that's why they used that word from the beginning. And you may recall it was sometime after January 6th, that suddenly the Democrat media apparatus, they all started going in with the narrative, insurrection, insurrection, insurrection. It just came up out of nowhere. It wasn't initially called an insurrection. It was very deliberate. That it was a very deliberate rollout, like they do. And so the Supreme Court ruled that one person can't just say that something's an insurrection. It takes an act of Congress. So and I was looking at the National Convention, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, but I was looking at the National Convention, and just looking at all of what are the threats relating to the National Convention. What is it that we should be concerned about? And one of the things, the biggest threat at that time that I saw, and this is before that the meeting where Shelby Bush was talking about how do we suspend the rules for the convention and take over the convention from the floor. So this is before that. This is back in April into May. What I was concerned about then was if Hakeem Jeffries were the Speaker of the House before the National Convention, and he passed a resolution to declare that Trump was an insurrection act and January 6th was an insurrection, then secretaries of state around the country could have said, look, it's constitutional now. He's an insurrectionist. We can take him off the ballot. And if that happened right before the convention, then there could be enough doubt and confusion, because I don't think that the Supreme Court would have held that. I think that he still would have been on the ballot. They would have reversed it. But what would have likely happened then is that there could have been enough doubt, or at least what likely was the hope, was that there could have been enough doubt in people's minds that that they might have voted against a Trump nomination. So, um, so I think that that was part of what was going on there. Do I think that Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of them knew that that's what they were doing as they and Steve Bannon knew that that's what they were doing as they were trying to advocate for Mike Johnson's removal? I have no idea, but I do know that Trump never engaged in that at all. Trump never attacked or criticized Mike Johnson. He only supported him all along, and yet these people did the opposite. And I am quite certain that Trump noticed that. In the same way that throughout Trump's campaign, and especially in the latter weeks of Trump's campaign, he was promoting, "We've got to be too big to rig. I want you to dare to be optimistic about the future." He's trying to bring hope to his voters, and we can do this, we're going to win, those, being optimistic, whereas all of the narratives from the Flynn team were all very quite pessimistic. And so that kind of brings us into this train of logic. Um so I know it's small and I'm sorry, but I'm going to read through it. So the first thing is that my first assertion is that Flynn has been engaged in number one. Flynn has been engaged in psychological warfare against Trump and MAGA since 2016, and I think it goes back even earlier than that. But 2016 is really when it started. He really started coming out more, and uh, that's when he started working on Trump's campaign and all that. So um, Carrie says, MTG will be helping Elon and Vivek with Doge. Now, just on that, that's I don't know much about that, except that I don't know much about her involvement and how involved she's going to be. But I do know that the Doge does not have that. That's the Department of Government Efficiency, which they're just kind of making up, and they're saying that they're going to have the ability to slash costs and stuff. The director of the Office of Management and Budget is the one that's going to have power over that, and I don't it's as far as I've seen, Trump has not yet named his OMB director. At the national convention, I was hearing rumors that it was likely to be Vivek, and that would make a lot of sense if he makes I know Vivek is part of this Doge, but if he makes Vivek the director of the OMB, that would make a lot of sense, and, um I was sitting on the bus at the national convention. Our hotel was in Madison, an hour and a half away from Milwaukee, from the convention center, and we shared a bus with the Washington DC delegation. So I talked to some delegates from Washington DC who were the exact type of consultants who would help someone like Vivek to cut costs, because that's what they do, is they actually help to reorganize, uh, pare down, scale down government organizations. They negotiate with the unions. They do all the stuff that we don't even think about. Normal people don't even think about, in removing government employees, the things that you don't think that you would have to do. Going over all the legal hurdles and, uh, uh, overcoming the loopholes that employees would use to try to hold on to their jobs. These are the people that know how to navigate all that. And it was really, I think God really put me there right next to them on the bus, and we had an hour and a half long conversation about it. And um and they really believed that that Vivek was the person that could do that in the OMB. Um, so yeah, I think that largely though, Doge is, it's kind of like a research group, and it's super valuable. They're going to be kind of like consultants, and they won't have any real political power. The OMB director will. So whatever, MTG can help, anybody can help. In fact, I think that anybody can apply to help. Elon actually put that out. So if you'd like to help, you could apply. So and I don't think that your help would be any more or less valuable or noteworthy than Marjorie Taylor Greene's. So we'll leave that. Um, so number one, and there's 13 points here, and gonna try to get through this fairly quickly. And you can read this. It's right. It's on my X. And I said, so Flynn has been engaged in psychological warfare against Trump and MAGA since 2016, and it goes back beyond that. But that's really when it became uh, noteworthy or visible. I think to us. I think it was more planning stages before that. And I've talked about that a lot. And if you've got specific questions about that, that I'm sure I'm going to be at some point looking further back in time. Um, and if you have anything on that to share with me, I'd be happy to take a look at it. So that's number one. And the way that we recognize these psyops is that it's all about stoking and inciting fear, anger, hatred, hopelessness, that kind of stuff. Um, it's emotional manipulation, and Ivan Raiklin and others around Ivan Raiklin and others in the network, not so much Flynn directly, um, but they show us what their end game is, and that's MAGA domestic terrorism. And they Raiklin has been pretty open about that he wants citizens to engage in live streamed, publicly viewable swatting raids, violent swatting raids of against his deep state target list, which of course doesn't include Flynn and and these people that are running psyops against us. But it's his list who he thinks this is people that haven't been charged with the crime formally, people where there is no actual known police investigation. He just wants to go in and raid their homes and, in his words, apply the precedent that has been set against people like Alex Jones and Roger Stone and Ashley Babbitt, even which was murder. So I mean that's a pretty clear call uh, to murder. So and that is the MAGA domestic terrorism that the FBI has been saying since a year ago, October in 23. There was a Newsweek article saying that the FBI was saying that the biggest threat that we would face in 2024 is MAGA domestic terrorism. And I credit all of us with all of us really with the true MAGA movement with not falling prey to these psyops and engaging in crazy like they were trying to get us to. Um, Deb says Ivan has used Trump's plan to stop the deep state in a lawful way. Ivan takes that and turns it to going after the deep state in ways that sound very unlawful always. Yep. Yeah. So, and that's exactly true. I think, Trump is talking about, from what I can see, and we talked about his 10-point plan. It is very much a lawful means of pursuing justice. And I think what we should want, if we appreciate and we want the restoration of our constitutional rights, and we appreciate our Bill of Rights and all of that, and the constitutional process, is we should want slow and deliberate justice. We don't want retribution. And Ivan calls himself the Secretary of Retribution. We should not want retribution. A society that's built on retribution instead of justice is it's not going to last very long, and it quickly becomes a tyrannical, horrible dictatorship. We the People says Raiklin sits on the board of director for America's Future alongside General Michael Flynn. Yes, and so right after Raiklin's viral video with Zoe Chase, that it was seen by 30 million people. It was a week or two after that Flynn rewarded him. I believe it was a reward. It very much looked like that. The timing made it look like that, with a position on the board of directors for his family 501c3, along with Laura Logan. And just there's not very many outside of their family that are on the board of directors there. So, step one, psyops. Step two, Flynn's partner since 2020, Patrick Byrne, has admitted frequently that he works with the deep state, even taking orders from Comey and Brennan. He even admits in his book and in his movie that Comey and Brennan told him to have an affair with a Russian spy, so he did. So he sleeps with who Comey and Brennan tell him to sleep with. I mean, this is, you know, it's a deep state operation. I mean, he is deep state, and I've also argued that I strongly believe that Patrick is and always has been a communist. Um, and there's several points there, but I mean, just even recently in his chalet, he had a giant picture of Mao on his wall, and his cat was named Che Guevara. He claims to be a libertarian. I don't think libertarians do that kind of thing, have that kind of overt interest in um, communist dictators. Okay, number three, Cash's book, Government Gangsters, completely and deliberately whitewashes Flynn's involvement in Crossfire Hurricane. So in Crossfire Hurricane, the FBI's code name for Flynn was Crossfire Razor, and that was because Flynn had extensive ties with Putin and Russia, going back to 2013 when he, against the protests of and complaints and warnings by the CIA, he went as the director of the DIA into the GRU, which is the Russian CIA intelligence agency, and not sure, whatever he did there, whatever he told them, whatever he gave them, all of that, of course, is classified. But that really started a long chain, became a long chain of breadcrumbs that really strongly connected him with Putin. And even McCain kind of made some public accusations in March of 2014 that Flynn was a little too cozy with Putin. Um, and so Flynn was Crossfire Razor. He did so many things. I've talked about him a lot, but it all bears repeating, because I think this is helpful for all of us to have this handy so that we can engage in conversations with people who think still that, yeah, Flynn's a good guy. He's an American patriot. He's a martyr for this country. He's a Trump supporter. So I think it's good to have some arguments handy, and some good ones are really relating to what he did during Trump's uh, his first campaign in 2016. He took $530,000 from the Turkish government to spy on and help kidnap a legal U.S. Uh, resident. He was not a citizen. He was a Turkish citizen that was a cleric that was here in the United States legally. And he also was paid by an Israeli company, I think it was called ISO, that had the Pegasus system, which was this, and this is a Mossad linked organization. I don't speak out much against Mossad. I don't think that Mossad is the center of corruption in the world. I do think that it is corrupt, just like our own intelligence community. And I don't believe that um, Israel is the center of corruption in the world, although I'm sure it is as corrupt, at least as our government. I don't believe that any one religion or all religion is bad, but I do believe that there certainly is corruption there, and I am 100% opposed to hatred in all forms, and especially anti-Semitism, which I believe has been that is another psyop that is really trying to infiltrate the right. They are trying to, and there are actual Nazis now on the right, in greater numbers than I've ever seen, and it horrifies me. And I absolutely condemn that. So that's the first time that I've spoken out about that, but I think it's important. So um, yeah, so there, he did accept money. He was a lobbyist for for Pegasus, which has the technology to spy on our phones. Um, Kind of crazy stuff. And he was doing this while he was on Trump's campaign. Um, there's a picture with Flynn sitting at a dinner table with Putin. Yeah, and that happened in December. That happened in December of 2015, just 2 months before Flynn joined Trump's campaign. And because of that, um, and we know via documents that have been made public that we know that at the latest, Flynn knew from the FBI that he was under investigation by the FBI August, I believe it was 16th of 2016. And the question I have is, when did he tell Trump that he was under investigation by the FBI? That's a big question I have. I don't think that he told him right away. Um, and, um, so, yeah, if anybody has specific information about that, that's something that I'm trying to figure out. When exactly did he tell Trump that the FBI was investigating him? And did he? I I have a strong feeling that he didn't, um, until, much later. I don't think that Trump would have chosen him as the NSA director if he knew that he was under the investigation by the FBI. I don't think he would have. So, um, Deb says Flynn did not inform President Trump that he had a phone call from another country's leader. Yeah, that was Russian Ambassador Kislyak. Numerous days later, Trump found out. Yeah, and actually, it wasn't even days later. Trump didn't find out until he had that call in November of 2016. Trump didn't actually find out about it until I think it was after he was inaugurated. It was a lot more than just days. And um, no, it was before he was inaugurated. It was when it was when Pence went public with the statements that he had, because Flynn actually lied to Pence. And about those calls, Pence made public statements based on those lies, repeating Flynn's lies. He got caught in those lies, which all came back to Trump. That's how Trump found out about it. It was a mess. It was a mess. And, Flynn can't argue, oh, well, I didn't know. I mean, he was in the military for 33 years at the very top level. He was a 3-star general. He understood chain of command. He knows the right way to do things, and he didn't do it. General Keith Kellogg writes about it in his book, Yep, War by Other Means. And yeah, it is definitely worth checking out. There's a chapter there about Flynn. Okay, so that is, and my concern with Kash Patel there about his book is that his book is a complete whitewashing of all of that. Even further, Flynn discouraged Jared Kushner and Don Jr. from bringing counsel to meetings that he helped to set up with Russians, between them and Russians, who then tried to trap them into a quid pro quo, accepting this for that, political favors kind of thing after Trump was elected, before he was president. Um, and that was illegal. And, that had they done that, it would have been an actual crime. And he discouraged them from having attorneys there that could have, protected them. He said, yeah, it's no big deal from what I understand. So, yeah. And it is a fact here, uh, Poisson, in fact, he did choose to lie. So, yeah. Um, uh, so Kash in his book, which is he presents it as a definitive historical reference of that time of the Russia investigation and what happened there, the whole Russia hoax. He presents this is what actually happened. I investigated it. This is the inside scoop on what happened. He never once uses the word that I was looking all throughout the whole thing. I never saw anywhere in the book Crossfire Razor, the words Crossfire Razor. And I'm not sure how you tell that story about Crossfire Hurricane without explaining why Flynn was called Crossfire Razor. I don't see how you can do that honestly. But yet that's what he did. And he never even mentioned Flynn as he's talking about the whole chronology of events until he gets to chapter 12, which is all about Flynn. And it's such a glowing praise and revisionist history about Flynn that it looks to me just like they use that as the outline for the Flynn movie. Um, and so that's the reason why, it's if he will, and this is kind of the argument that I'm gonna end up with, but if Kash would do that and revise history in that way to protect Flynn in his book, then he clearly is not trustworthy to investigate Flynn. I think I'm not saying that Flynn is guilty of crimes. I have no idea. In the end, it's probably going to be plausible deniability, and he'll get off without anything. But I do think he needs to be investigated. And there's a whole lot that we don't know right now that we need to know. And we need to have some transparency. He's been engaged in psychological warfare against us. And that's very clear just looking at the way that he's used narratives, the way that he's created his Flynn podcaster network. All of this it's just like what the Democrats have done with the mainstream media. And that needs to be investigated also. It's all psychological warfare that originates, I believe, from our military and has been directed at the American people. and it's wrong, and we need to we need some justice from that. That needs to be investigated, and I just do not believe, the bottom line is I do not believe that Kash Patel would investigate his friend Michael Flynn. I don't believe he would. And again, I'm not saying that Flynn is guilty. I I think that he's done some things that warrant an investigation. And I think that we need an FBI director who is not compromised to the point that there is anyone, not just Flynn, I mean, that there's anyone that they won't investigate, if there is actual, probable cause to do so. So, um, that in a nutshell, that's where I'm going with this. Number 4, Flynn was overtly running a contingency campaign for president in the event something happened to Trump, and we know that because there were Roger Stone posted numerous, I think at least twice, he posted on Twitter, "We are running a contingency campaign for Flynn for president in case something happens to Trump." And the Bus and Movie Tour launched on May 9th of this year, and um, number 5, that movie and bus tour had a very specific target audience, and that audience was state GOP activists. So they're activists that they had trained, that they were connected to, and in many cases they had funded. Like $700,000 went to Shelby Bush's PAC, We the People Arizona Alliance. $700,000 went to this organization in Michigan, the president of which is listed as Lori Skibo, who is Christina Caramo's chief of staff. So, and that's interesting. That was both $700,000 in both cases, and that was through 2022. We don't have the numbers yet for 2023 because there's a delay in the filings. But there are other payments to other organizations, and I just don't have the bandwidth to get into the weeds to find out who are the actual recipients within those organizations and how they're linked to state party activists and organizations. But from what I'm seeing, certainly in Michigan and Arizona, drawing direct financial connections between the America Project and these insurgents that act the same way, using the same language, the same methods, using Saul Alinsky tactics to take over the party, doing what Dan Schultz described on the Steve Bannon show as invading and taking over the party. And I've been describing this as an insurgency, which I absolutely believe it is. And I'm using that thread on X about Hoekstra to kind of explain that. So, okay, so moving on, they were targeting the target market for the May 9th release, and especially you look at that date. So that May 9th release date was just 2 months before the national convention. And it was released right at the time that the national delegates were being selected across all the states. And there's no like one date. Every state was different. Some of them didn't select them until almost June. Some of them selected them as early as February. Most ours in Michigan, it was in March. But for the most part, we knew who the delegates were in most states by May, and it was those national delegates who were the ones in the states that I was watching that were most actively promoting the Flynn movie in every state. They were the ones that were making sure that their people, and especially the national delegates, and I listened on X Spaces where they were talking about, we need delegates to watch this. Ivan Raiklin was talking about that, preparing for the national convention. He says the one thing you need to do to prepare for the national convention is watch the Flynn movie. I'm not sure how that would have helped, but it's pure propaganda. And they were just trying to, this was all part of a coordinated campaign. I mean, the bus tour was for so many people, and I'm sure many of you watching this, that was one of the things that really tipped opened your eyes, and it opened my eyes and said, there's something really wrong here. Like, why is he doing this? He's not helping Trump. Trump is the one that is running for president. There's nothing here he says he's for Trump, but what is he actually doing to help Trump? Okay. So, I think that's really important that they were, working on, and with these people who all are trained in Saul Alinsky tactics and all that. So then I exposed number 6. I exposed this training meeting in early June of this year, so just a few weeks after this movie was released, and it was right around the time when, they actually went to Arizona, and when they went to Arizona, it was absolutely the insurgents within the party that were promoting it, and the national delegates that, the insurgent national delegates were all there. Not all of the national delegates from Arizona or pretty much any state were insurgents, but in Arizona, the majority were. And Shelby Bush had a training meeting there. And in that meeting, she was teaching people how to suspend the rules from the convention floor, which is basically how the delegates can take over the convention from the floor. And if you watched any of the national convention, it's very difficult to imagine how that would have played out. The convention is, this is the party's opportunity and President Trump's opportunity to present his case, to present the platform, and to show to it's like a job interview, to show the American public in primetime television why they should vote for President Trump and for Republicans. That's the purpose of the whole thing. But they were trying to make the purpose about themselves. How can we be heard? That's what they wanted. And when I was in Oklahoma, they were telling me that the same thing happened in Oklahoma at their hotel at the national convention. They really wanted to be heard on the floor. It's all about them, right? Just like the podcasters that they listen to. You can tell that they're just very self-absorbed people within the Flynn network, right? So uh, I found this very problematic. I wrote a piece about it. I published that piece on my Substack, and immediately I had the Trump team talking to me. They verified my research with their own research, and then they immediately started taking action to remove Shelby Bush and 5 other delegates from the Arizona delegation. Harmeet Dillon was helping them with that, and a few days into that process, Caroline Wren, who is I believe, linked with Flynn, certainly aligned and running parallel in this operation along with Flynn, and very closely connected with Steve Bannon. And she also runs Kari Lake, manages Kari Lake. She's her handler. She managed her campaigns and made a whole lot of money. She got pretty wealthy off of Kari Lake. But she's so Kari Lake swooped in, sweet talked Trump into causing this to just go away, and Shelby Bush promised to be good and whatever, so it didn't happen, and they kind of stopped talking about it. But there were other states that were in similar kinds of situations. There was fighting over credentialing all the way up until the convention. Number 7, I shared that. Then number 8, they continue to claim to this day that the reason why they were doing this was because because the establishment was planning on taking over the convention and replacing Trump with Nikki Haley or, you know, Ron DeSantis or something. And I talked to people all over the RNC and all over state GOPs throughout the country. There was no plan for that, no energy for that whatsoever. And yet Flynn and Raiklan and all of these people and Shelby Bush, they were all talking about it in the same way that we see their narratives just instantly come. They often start with Flynn, and then but sometimes they start with somebody else, but they're instantly disseminated across the network in unified fashion, just like the mainstream media does. And that was one of those narratives. But I knew it was a lie. I knew it was a lie because people were telling me, even in Vermont, which voted in the primary, it's the only state that actually voted for Nikki Haley over Trump. There was no plans for that whatsoever. Trump was the nominee. He won hands down. There was zero energy for any replacement of Trump. And Tim Hale says Flynn was trying to get Raiklan inserted into RNC leadership with Laura Trump. Yeah, and I think that was a joke. I don't think that there was that there was ever even the remotest possibility. But it's just like everything else that they do. That it's just the Flynn narrative. Their Flynn network was doing the same thing even back in 23 with Kari Lake saying that Trump was going to pick Kari Lake as the vice president, and that was a complete fabrication by Caroline Wren. Um, and yeah, there's never any truth to that. So Tim, I'm really glad you're here. Um, and I never actually saw that he was trying to get Ray Clinton inserted into RNC leadership. There's no way that that would have ever happened. I mean, just knowing, well, the little bit that I know and the people that I do know that are there, there is no chance that Ray Clinton ever would have been allowed anywhere near them. Um, yeah, Deb says, I noticed that Alex Jones, Flynn, Raikkonen all seem to act like they know so much more than Trump does. Isn't that just sickening? It makes me sick. They are so arrogant, and it shows of themselves acting like they're advisors to Trump. Exactly. And that's what, and Flynn has been on 3 or 4 podcasts a day at least since the election, trying to assert himself as this advisor to Trump. It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. So, um, yeah, so that whole thing, that guise, the boogeyman that they created of the establishment was all just fake, and I knew it. So then, none of this is number 9. None of this made any sense until the assassination attempt 2 days before the convention. Um, and as soon as that happened, and I thought, "Oh my God, this is exactly what they're what they were planning for." And and I had this window into it because I was just, you know, I just, I, it's like, I'm just an independent reporter, and I was just covering on what my sources were bringing to me. And I was the only one that was covering this until Washington Post actually took my reporting and, I know this because I talked to the reporter, Yvonne Wingett Sanchez, and, uh, that there was, I was able to feed her some information, and she wrote the only story that I've seen in the mainstream media that shows, and what she showed in that story is amazing. I'll link to it in the show notes. Um, I just make a note so I don't forget. Um, and um, So I'll link to it in the show notes, but it showed this Washington Post story. It showed that Shelby Bush was was caught in a holding a training session for national delegates on how to remove Trump from the delegate and replace Trump as the nominee and to take over the convention from the floor. It showed her financial ties to the America Project and Flynn and Byrne and Lindell. And it showed that Trump and the RNC were working to remove Shelby Bush from the delegation, and so that was before Kari Lake swooped in. That was an amazing story. I was just overjoyed. I think that's the best thing that Washington Post ever done. It was awesome. And yeah, I think, and they've got a treasure there in Yvonne Wingett Sanchez. She is a very good reporter, and she's one of those reporters that you don't know her politics talking to her, um, and that's the way it should be. So there is, there are some good reporters. I think that I've talked about being a statesman, and I think part of being a statesman is being able to read pieces from a variety of different and take news from a variety of different sources and learn to discern, okay, well, this part is partly true, and this part of this is true, this part of that's true, and putting it together and into a bigger and more cohesive and more accurate and true picture. It's hard to do because so much of the mainstream media, they just use language in such a, as a weapon against us, telling us that we're stupid and, election deniers and stuff like that, which I know it's hard, but I think it's important to read through it to find and to mine um, where there is good investigative journalism, even if it's tainted by the editors or even by the journalists themselves in things that, with false assumptions. So total tangent, but I think it's valuable. It's worth thinking about. So, um, let's see, number 10, and this is important, is that, I'm not suggesting that Flynn knew that it was going to happen. I'm not suggesting that Flynn was behind the assassination attempt, but it is very clear that Flynn was anticipating an assassination attempt. I'm just going to give one little example right here. This was just from one X space, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens of times that Flynn talked publicly about Trump being assassinated long before July 13th. Here's one example.
Assassination. And I talk about assassinations in this movie. I talk about revisiting assassinations. I talk about assassinations of the 60s. I talk about how do we assassinate people today. And that's a very, very, it's a very honest assessment by me. And actually, there's a couple of others that Tucker does talk to it. It's very powerful. It's very powerful because we're going through this. And again, kind of back to the question about, J6 and everything that I talked about earlier. You know, so anyway, assassination is not off the table. Okay. And how we assassinate people.
He's saying he said this 2 or 3 times now, how we assassinate people. He said that 2 or 3 times just in this little space, how we assassinate people. I mean, I don't know. I mean, to me, this is in your face. I mean, he is including himself in his language in those who were who may have been involved in this assassination attempt, at least in an assassination, a possible future assassination attempt. He's including himself in his language in that group. He's saying how we assassinate people.
How we assassinated people that were in their way in the past, and how we assassinate people who are in their way now.
Okay. So yeah, I think that this warrants an investigation. And whether or not Flynn was directly involved, what I can say very truthfully and what I'm very convinced of is that Flynn was the one person who would have benefited the most from such an event. And he had positioned himself through his work within state parties, funding to organizations that were taking over state Republican parties. They had at least a dozen. There were at least a dozen of the state's delegations on the floor of the convention were controlled by people who had actively promoted Flynn's movie starting, in the 2 months prior to the convention. Another dozen or so of the delegations would have been controlled. They had activists, and Solinsky type training in activists on how to disrupt and control a meeting. That who have been doing that in county and state parties over the last 4 years, that were in the delegations that could have taken control over their state delegations had Trump actually been assassinated. So there were Flynn very easily the national convention could have very easily come under the control of people who were very actively promoting Flynn's movie in the 2 months prior to the convention. And I think it very much stands to reason that the convention, that Flynn himself could have directly or indirectly taken control over the National Republican Convention had that bullet made its mark. And so, and I don't think that there's anyone else that, in fact, I'm very confident, at least in regards to the National Convention, that there is no one else that could say that. There is no one else that could have taken over the convention. There would have been so much chaos. There's really only one group of people, and they all have allegiance to Flynn, that were completely prepared to operate in that kind of chaotic environment and take control in that type of chaotic environment because they've been practicing it in their state parties, creating chaos. An example happened just last week in just a few nights ago in LD3, the largest legislative district in Arizona. Brian Ferentz, who I was just sent, I'm going to publish it. I was just sent some segments from some of his horror movies or horror novels that he's written, where they describe rape and murder of children. Like this is sick. And he's now the Republican, the second vice chair and he really is the one that's controlling the LD3 now. So, and the way that that happened is the meeting started at 7 p.m. and it went until 12:30 at night because they created enough chaos that half the people left, and then he won. And that's what they do. That's the way that Christina Caramo got elected. It was a 10 to 12 hour meeting. More than a third of the people, she started with a third support. More than a third of the people gave up and quit before the last vote and before the last round of voting. And she ended up being the state party chair. And that's the way that they do this. This is their way of operating. They create chaos. They drive people away. They yell at people. They're rude. They're obnoxious. They're hateful. They claim to be Christians, and yet their fruit is the fruit of the flesh. And that's what they do. Tim says predictive programming, and that's um, in relation to I think especially in relation to what Flynn was just talking about there, and that is certainly one theory, is that what he was putting out there was predictive programming to try to incite that in a way. And maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was an actual, there was something more coordinated and planned. I don't know. I have no idea. But I think the American public need to know. I think President Trump needs to know how exactly it came to be that he was nearly murdered 2 days before the national convention, and that there was one person who stood really well to benefit from that. And um, so, I think that investigation needs to happen, and that's really the point that I'm trying to drive towards, is that we just need to know the truth. And maybe every single day I ask myself, where am I wrong? What if I'm wrong? You know, it kind of drives some of the people closest to me a little nuts, because um, I really, it's not that I care so much about being right, but I'm saying things publicly, and it's really important that I'm right. It's not just important to me. It's not like an ego thing. It's just, I mean, I feel a sense of tremendous responsibility to be right and to not lead people astray. And so I do believe that everything that I've said here about the National Convention, I mean, I've seen it, that followed the evidence. It's right. And I do believe absolutely that there is nobody that could have benefited more from what was intended to happen on July 13th than Flynn. I mean, he would have become, I 100% believe that he would have become the Republican nominee for president. Um, so that needs to be investigated, and that's really point 10. And then point 13 is back to Kash Patel, who has been at pretty much all of the Reawaken Tour events. He is extremely close with Flynn. In his book, he was 100% protecting Flynn, and so why wouldn't he protect Flynn if he were the head of the FBI? And not that Flynn is the worst person in the world. I don't think that he is, but I think we just need to know. And, if there is probable cause, he needs to be investigated. And we can't have somebody there as the FBI director who would protect him at all costs. So that's my case. Maybe I'm wrong. You're welcome to show me where I'm wrong. I do want to see it where I am. And so, but so far, everybody that's telling me that I'm wrong, it's just like Dan Bongino, where they say it's all lies, or they try to make some sort of attack on my character. They say that I'm deep state, and I don't think that that's a very productive argument. So, yeah. So if you've got any information that shows where I'm wrong, I'd be happy to take a look at it. But I think that the bottom line, the logic here, is that we need somebody that can, one, bring reform to the FBI, because what they've done in political persecution against Trump and against Americans and against J6ers is terrible. It's wrong. It is evil. It is immoral. It is unconstitutional. And we need to have transparency. We need to have justice, and we need to have protection so that that doesn't ever happen again. And I don't have the answers as to how to do that, but it needs to happen. And that's not retribution. That's justice, and that's sound government. And we need that. And we need somebody that can bring that. I never believed that Matt Gaetz was the right man for the job. I think I just expected it to be Ken Paxton. I think he'd do a great job. And I would be surprised if he's not announced as the new nominee, or the Trump's new pick, but we will see. And I'm sure there's other really good people that could do the job too. And the same thing with the FBI. So there's no real rush in choosing these picks right now. And I thought it was interesting that Trump seemed to be so aggressive and immediate in making these selections. I think that he should take his time and he should make sure that he's picking the right people. And he should vet them so that we have a smooth confirmation process. And they should be people that he knows that he can trust, that he really knows their background. Uh, and and he should be, I think he should have people researching for him who are seeking as many different perspectives as possible, like I have. I'd love to, hey, Trump, I'd love to work for you. President Trump, I would absolutely love to work for you as a researcher. But I'm just, there's nothing really special about me. There's lots of people that could do it. And so I think he's got a really good team. He's got a lot of really good people around him. Everybody makes mistakes. I do think that Matt Gaetz was a mistake, and history has kind of proven that correct. So we'll see what comes. And I think what I said from the moment that he was elected is don't expect perfection, but I think we're reasonable to expect it's going to be better than what we would have gotten otherwise. So things are good, and I appreciate all of you. And Deb asks, so I have to ask, when is Trump going to pick Flynn for something? Maybe he should shine the light on him and expose him more. Yeah, if that's what he was doing with Matt Gaetz, sure, maybe he should do that with Flynn. In a lot of ways, it really would, it would really, the left would really go after Flynn so hard. There's so much dirt on Flynn because he's created dirt intentionally for himself, right? I mean, he's deliberately created dirt so that it would smear Trump. And that's a big part of the operation, is everything, all the crazy that Flynn would do would come back on Trump, and the media has always really forcefully connected it and tied it to Trump, and harmed Trump with what used Flynn's craziness to attack Trump, and Burns' craziness, and Burn is nuts. So yeah. Anyways, thank you all very much. And we started a little late, went a little longer, but it's all good. And tomorrow at 4 p.m., we're going to do the members only podcast, and that will be at biggertruthmedia.com. So I look forward to seeing you there.